I usually like to do like a mantra to tune in, and then I'm totally flexible and excited to talk to you.
Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, I want to do, let's tune in. Let's drop in with everyone listening.
This is a mantra that my teacher, Krishna Kaur, taught to me and shared with me. It's from the Kundalini tradition. It's in a language called Gurmukhi, and it helps us tune in with the divine chain of teachers and this kind of like flow of wisdom that is throughout time and also within ourselves. And I like to say it's a flow of wisdom that's throughout and beyond time. So it's right here, right now, and also boundless. So the words are Om Namo Gurudev Namo. I'll chant it 3 times. Feel free to just listen or hum along or even tune me out if you'd like. And then the space is ours. I'll bring my hands to prayer pose and kind of find a nice resting spot there in the center of my chest, noticing about 3 breaths. And I'll inhale, exhale, inhale to begin. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Om Namo Gurudev Namo. Thank you.
I mean, I could sit there and do that and listen to you do that for another hour.
It's nice.
That was so beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Halli, thank you for being here on the Woo Report today. It means so much to me that you reached out after the first episode and said that it spoke to you, and that's the whole point of this podcast. And I know that you are on a journey doing the work, and I'm really looking forward to reconnecting with you and getting into it. And just for context on how we met, you grew up with my husband, Matt, and he tells the story, like it's a prize, but he's like, Halli was my first kiss in 2nd grade. Do you remember it that way too?
I remember it being in 4th grade, and for the record, it was not my first kiss.
No,
but
it was
we did
his.
kiss. Yeah, it was his, but not mine.
Oh my gosh. I love it. Oh, it's so funny. And then we were in LA together for a while, like early LA, like fresh off. I mean, I was 21, I think, when we started hanging out. And what I remember, I have a vivid memory of you standing in your apartment where you were telling me about doing Teach for America. And it was the first time in my adult, like about to, working life where I felt like someone was really passionate and felt full of purpose. And I like, it stuck with me. I remember being like, oh my gosh, Halli is just like, she's changing the world. She's changing the world. And I had never I'm in entertainment, just like, not really, not changing the world, so just on the red carpet. And I just remember feeling like, wow, that's so cool that she is doing something that she's so passionate about.
I appreciate you saying that. It's moving to me. And also, I personally feel like you changed the world with your presence. Like you have such the brightest light.
Thank you. That's
and,
so nice.
The guys that I grew up with, like, I was protective of them, Matt included, right? My first boyfriend. And, but I never really, I always trusted Matt with you and like trusted his heart with you. And I think because you have that like kind and loving presence, which really makes a difference for people, myself included.
Thank you. That's so nice. I know. I felt like we were such babies out there in LA that early
Well, we certainly
time.
didn't think we were babies.
We were
Like, I felt
we
grown.
run this. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. We're
yeah.
like, we are so cool. We are in
Yeah.
it. We are doing the thing. We are like running from loft to Santa Monica to party.
Yeah, not
There was
loft.
there was that loft up there in that loft. Yeah, crazy things happen
Yeah.
up there. What a good time. Okay, so, I love reconnecting with you now, and it's been a long time. And, when I asked you to send your bio, you sent it over. And the first thing that I read in your bio, you start with, I felt terrible for most of my life. And by my late 20s, I had built a life that looked good on the outside, but my insides and my personal life were falling apart. And so I really want to get into what that means to you and why that was happening. And I don't think that you're alone in that. I think a lot of people wake up and are like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
In a job they don't like, and they get that promotion and it looks good, but like, do they really like that job? And do they really want to be spending their time doing it? So take us on the journey and what was going on.
Yeah. Whew. So, I'm like, where does the journey start? I'm sharing this in hopes that it will be supportive, right, for other women who have had similar experiences to mine. I identify like very openly as a survivor, as a sexual assault survivor, both because it's important to me to be honest about my life and myself and my lived experience, and also because, and the second piece becomes more and more important to me, because by saying it, I make space for other people to say it and own it and be honest about it. And I have a 5-year-old daughter, and I think the more honest we are about the fact that 1 in 3 women has experienced sexual trauma, actually the safer world we create for our daughters, right? There's this little bit of a paradoxical thing, right? Where it's like, if we talk about it more, it's actually going to happen less. So that's part of the reason, right? That I'm here, that I'm open about it, that I share my story. And so my story really starts when I was about 3-ish years old. And from that age till I was about 8 years old, I was abused by my dad. And, it was so hard because it was in my house. So it was a violation of my body, but also a violation of my house, right? Which should have been a safe place. Of course I wanted it to be a safe place, right? I deserve for it to be a safe place. And, when I got to be a little bit older, right? Like 9, 10-ish, and the abuse stopped, I kind of, not consciously, I think unconsciously, just put it in a box, right? Like I even remember this teacher actually once in 5th grade, like pulling me aside in the playground. I mean, like, is everything okay? Like, you seem like you're upset. I'm like, nope, I'm good. Ran away from my teacher, right? Because the box needed to be tightly shut to keep me safe. And so, but there was so much in the box. And I think the weight of that box was really what kept me from being happy and experiencing joy and experiencing, the fullness of life. And, that's really the lived experience of so many trauma survivors, is that because we haven't processed the trauma that we've experienced, it weighs us down, right? It's like a backpack kind of, right? That keeps us from feeling light and alive and full. And so, I went through my life and I tried to check the boxes, and I particularly used like perfectionism and overachieving as ways to try to distract myself from the box and distract other people from it. So it's like, if I get this fancy degree, or I go to this prestigious school, or get this job, then if everything looks okay on the outside, right, then like no one's going to pay attention to what's happening on the inside, including me. But as you said, I got to a point in my life, I moved out to California, and I had some space from my family and my upbringing, and I had the degrees and the job, and I was like, oh God, like I actually have to look at myself now. And also, what also prompted me to look at myself was just my like romantic relationships were a nightmare. I'd always had good friendships, but anytime I tried to become romantically involved with someone, I was just like the worst picker of all pickers. So that's what brought me to the place of like wanting to make a shift and wanting to make a change. And there's this, I don't know astrology that well, but there's this idea of like a shift that happens in your late 20s, early 30s, astrologically. So you might know more about that than I do, but I think there was some of that going on too. Like it was time for a shift.
Is it called the Saturn return?
Oh, yeah.
I think
that had something to do with it.
Halli, I'm so sorry that you went through all of that. How did it start unraveling? Was there like a moment that you remember, or what was your first step? What did you do?
That's a good question. You know what I think it was? I actually have never thought about this before. There's two things that happen. So the first thing is that I had a memory come back to me of being abused when I was a kiddo. And I had never really had memories break through before. Like I just had a felt sense, something was off, something bad happened, but I never had like memories come through before. And this happens really commonly, memory recovery for people who've experienced like severe trauma. If you haven't experienced it, it might sound weird, but it's kind of like the feeling of like remembering a dream all of a sudden that you had. And so anyway, I had that first memory come through, and I could tell, there was more there. That was the most important thing. And then, I also, this terrible man, this is kind of funny to me, asked me to go on like this date, quote unquote, which was like a trip to Acapulco. Oh gosh, it's like one of those things. I'm like, oh, my 20s. Yeah, I really didn't know him. I met his mom at a bar in Sacramento, and she was like, "You should meet my son." And I think I met him like once, and then he was like, "Let's go to Mexico." So I went to Mexico with him, which was a red flag, right?
Yeah.
And I went to Mexico with him for I think 3 or 4 nights, and from the moment the plane landed to the moment we left, he was like drinking liquor out of a bottle, just like wasted, blackout drunk. And that for me, like that was like the last straw of like, okay, like I need to figure myself out, because the fact that I'm like in this situation it's a red flag for me, right? And like the people I'm attracting, the choices I'm making in my life.
Yes. And so what did you do?
I started EMDR therapy.
Tell
You
us
know
about that.
EMDR?
I've heard about it, but I don't know that it is very mainstream.
Okay. So it's a very effective therapy for kind of processing trauma and rewiring the neural pathways when they've been altered by a traumatic experience. So it stands for eye movement desensitization, something like that. Eye movement rapid desensitization. I think that's it. And basically, you either hold tappers in your hands or you move your eyes back and forth in order to connect the left and right sides of the brain, which creates a flow state, right? When that left and right side are like working together. And you go back to the traumatic experience or experiences, and something about the left and right sides of the brain connecting in that way can, if you're working with a professional who knows what they're doing, can like really rapidly process the trauma. So I started doing that, and I will be honest, and that opened up a Pandora's box of like, holy shit, like all these traumatic experiences are coming up that
Wow.
had been waiting, right? Like waiting to be processed and waiting till I was like in the space where I was ready to experience them. But I will say that it's this interesting, mutually beneficial relationship between like my yoga and meditation practice, which I had started like a year before EMDR, and the EMDR, and like those things working together, because my daily yoga and meditation practice, like I had been dabbling since I was a teenager with yoga and meditation. But once I started that daily practice, like no matter what, I wake up every morning and I do it. Even on the trip with that terrible man,
Oh my
I woke
God.
up every morning, right? And I was like looking at the ocean and I was like, okay, like this is my practice, coming back to myself, starting my day off with myself, right? And so, like, I think having that practice, like, down pat after a year, that my theory is that, like, opened up a portal for me to be like, okay, like, now I'm ready to, like, do the work of processing the trauma.
Yes, because you have to have that compassionate relationship with yourself. Otherwise, things will come up and like, who knows if there'll be shame or guilt or some other emotions that you can't even begin to, how are you processing them yourselves? Okay, so wait. So with EMDR, you have someone there, so it's kind of also like therapy.
It is therapy. So there's like a bunch of people across the country. If anyone's interested, like you can look up EMDR practitioners and you can find them in most places across the country. And there are people who are trained in this technique that's specifically for processing trauma. Yeah. So I found an EMDR therapist. I was living in California, in Sacramento at the time. And just like, it's so intense, Laura. Like basically everyone does it in different ways, but the one I started working with, she was like, okay, what's like the worst memory you have? Like the one that you can't even bear to be with. And that's where we started. And every
Wow.
session we would have to go back to that memory. And the thing
Wow.
is that for me, like I had to want my freedom so badly that it was worth doing all of that. And even when I was like in the thick of it, right, in that EMDR therapy, I could feel a freedom. I could feel a different kind of life. I could envision a different kind of life that was like multicolored and joyful and like open, that was so different than how I had lived, the 30 years before that. And that's like what kept me going.
Wow. Wow. So you start unlocking this freedom and you're still doing your meditation yoga practice. So what does this practice look like? Like, let's get granular about that practice.
Yeah. So my true love is Kundalini yoga, which is again not very mainstream. It's very woo, it's very esoteric, it's very
Here for it. I've never done
energetic.
Kundalini actually.
Well, I'll first practice on me. I would love to do that with you.
Ooh, cannot wait. Eek.
We can do a vlog. I
Yes.
think that's what the young people are doing. Um, yeah, when I come this summer, we'll do it.
Okay, great.
So that's my practice because it changes my life every time I do it. It's just like a deeply energetic practice that basically awakens a flow of energy in the spine. And not to go into all the details, but especially for everyone, we carry a lot of emotions and traumas in our hips, particularly if we've experienced sexual violence or sexual assault. So what Kundalini does is it allows any energy that's stuck in the lower chakras to like rise up. Right? This is like the high vibration, like the good vibration, that like elevated sense of being. And like the lower vibrations in the chakras are like just as important. Like we need to go to the bathroom every day. We need to digest our food. But like when we get up in like the heart, the throat, the third eye, the crown, like that's when things start feeling really good, at least for me. So that's what Kundalini gave me access to. So my morning practice has obviously changed over the past 11 years since I started it. But at the time, it was just like a Kundalini yoga set and then some like chanting mantra and some minutes of meditation in the morning.
And so when you do meditation, how do you drop in? Are you starting with gratitude, or I just feel like people get curious about people's practices.
Yeah. I'm laughing because you're assuming that I do drop in. Like, do you meditate?
I've started to, and that's why I'm just curious, because sometimes it's really hard to like, untangle all the knots. But and some days it's easier. And some days I start with gratitude. And some days I'm always staring at my oak tree. I have a relationship with my oak tree in the back
Yeah.
yard. And so that really helps me anchor in. And usually I just talk to her and tell her about how beautiful she is
Oh,
to start. And
yeah.
then it kind of pulls me into the present moment, because I'm always like, what's next? What are we doing? I'm always ruminating. Like, even if I don't have any input, like I'm not just, feeling my feet on the ground like I should be doing or whatever, like, not I should be doing, but I'm not always grounding like that. But yeah, sometimes I do really drop in, and sometimes I'm like, okay, it's not gonna work today. I need to move on with my life.
Yeah. I mean, so my stepdad, uh, he's been practicing both psychotherapy and Zen Buddhist meditation for almost 50 years. And so
Wow.
I learned a lot from him about being a teacher and a student and a meditator. And one thing that he talks about a lot is like how many bad, quote unquote, or like not dropped in meditations we have to have in order to get one of those good ones. You know what I mean? It's
Ooh,
and it's helpful for me because I'm like, there are so many days, like you said, when it's like the monkey mind, the knots of the mind, the rumination, the like just craziness, right?
totally. Just won't stop.
And
Yeah.
right. And then, and if I just keep going through those and just do it anyway, just noticing like my mind is a shit show today,
Yes.
as you know, there will be that day where it's like, "Holy shit." Like I see something, I feel something, I know something, right? I connect with something. So it's like, that's the practice. That's how I think about it.
Yeah, it's so good. Because I've had people ask me offline of this podcast,
Yeah.
like just simply, how do I look inward? How do I look inward? Because we keep talking about looking inward, looking inward, looking inward. And it's just like,
Mm,
it's such a big question because how do we look inward? It's like, well, we start with noticing. We start with noticing our thoughts, and we start with trying to be with our breath and trying to still them as much as you can.
yeah.
But not to shame or, judge your thoughts. What they can be whatever they
Yeah.
are. But it's tricky when you're not
It's
used to
so
it. And that's
tricky.
why it is a practice, exactly what you said.
Yeah. So the other thing I will say is that, I work primarily with sexual assault survivors, women who have experienced sexual violence and sexual trauma. And it's something that I think usually goes unsaid about yoga and about meditation in particular is that if we've experienced trauma and it's not processed, our nervous system is constantly on high alert and is like constantly hypervigilant. So it can actually be like unhealthy and like excruciatingly like painful to sit and be still. And so, like, I always say when I'm teaching meditation, first of all, I'm like, we're going to do this for 3 minutes. And like, if at any point it starts to feel uncomfortable or it's not right for you, just stop. Just like lie down, put your legs up the wall, or just like take a break and then come back to it if you feel ready. Because and the same goes for yoga. It's like certain poses like don't feel good for our bodies in certain moments. And if we're expecting everyone to move in the same way and at the same time and not have choice in what happens to their bodies, we're actually like replicating, right? The experience of being traumatized or being victimized.
Yes, it all has to feel right. And we have to know what feels good also.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's so much of the work I do with survivors is like either acquainting ourselves with our bodies for the very first time or reacquainting ourselves with our bodies, right? Because a lot of people use dissociation as a coping mechanism. Like when we've experienced trauma, I certainly like was dissociated from my body from the first 30 years of my life. Like I actually didn't know what it felt like to be here in my center rather than outside of my body looking in. And so a yoga practice, for example, like gentle movement can be just one way. I mean, there's infinite number of ways, yoga or dance or acting or surfing, but these physical practices can be one way that people who are dissociated, like I was, can gently start to get to know our bodies. And like you said, learn what actually feels good in our bodies, what we actually want for our bodies. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that this is, I think, especially important for women because people love to tell us how they think we should look, how they think we should act, how they think our bodies should move, like what and we should do with our bodies and when. It's like, so a part of my work is like to create space for us to choose what feels good for our bodies and when.
Okay, so you find yourself on the other side.
I think that's generous, Laura.
Is it? I mean, so tell me what, like, it's still a process? Are you like, how does it, you did the EMDR and you're not still doing that? Or do you feel like that chapter is closed?
So yeah, so I would say I did after like a while, like 4 or 5 years of doing EMDR therapy. I was then in my mid 30s, and I was doing EMDR therapy, and I was also alongside of that, like collecting these practices for healing. So like Eastern books, Western books, like doing chakra work, like working with different practitioners, learning from women like Tarana Burke, who founded the Me Too movement, like collecting all these methods and modalities for healing, right? And so there was a certain point in my own healing when I was like, definitely not like I'm healed, I've reached the finish line, but I was like, I've learned enough and I feel good enough in myself that I actually want to start sharing some of this. Like, this stuff is too good not to share. So it was like at that point, about 5 years in, that I started teaching yoga and meditation workshops for sexual assault survivors, for women. I was living on the West Coast, so I started them in the West Coast at that time. And I was amazed just like how they filled up. And so many women came who were said like, I've never seen anything like this before. I've always wanted something like this. I've never told anyone before. I've never been in a room with other survivors before, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a major turning point for me, when it was like, okay, I have enough in myself. Like, my cup is full enough that I want to start like letting it pour over a little bit, and sharing with humility what I've learned.
So before you started sharing in this way, how did all of this affect your relationships? And have your relationship they had to evolve? Your relationship with your mom, your relationship with your friends, with your significant others. Like, were you ever open about it with anyone before? Because I know you had mentioned that the box was tight. It was in a box, and the box was locked up tight.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious if anything ever peeked out, if you gave anyone any sense of what was going on.
No. Mm-mm. Because that was how I stayed safe, right? Like,
Yeah.
like keeping it a secret was part of how I stayed safe as a kid. So I used that modality until I was 30, right? And then I had the tools. And I moved off across the country from my family, frankly, and I had the tools to be like, okay, like, let me start to open the box. But I did slowly and gradually start to, share with people that were closer to me, and then share with the people that I was working with, and then now I'm sharing with everyone. And like, part of the reason, I think I said this to you before, but like, part of the reason that I share broadly now is because it's good for me, but it's also good for all of us. Like, as a mom with a daughter, right? Like, I know that the more we talk about sexual assault and sexual abuse now, like, actually the less it will be pervasive in the future. So I'm trying to create a world where we're open, so that these cycles can start to end.
And so you saw classes filling up, and then like, what type of impact was this making? Like, this has got to be, were you like, I found my purpose? You're like, this is my purpose? Like that,
Yeah,
I
I
just feel
was.
like,
I
yes.
was. I was. Yeah. And I still am. Like, every time I, lead a workshop or a retreat for survivors, and I'm like in the front of the room, so to speak, I'm like, yeah, this is it. It's a good feeling.
Yes. When you were teaching at Teach for America, like you were changing the world then. You were lit up then in a way that I hadn't really felt like lit up about my career on the red carpet. But it feels right. You teaching, you in front of a class, you seeing everyone in that class and being able to not only relate, but to help heal them. So when people come to you and they're you're giving them tools and modalities, you're giving them this yoga practice.
Yeah.
When you hear like trauma informed healing,
Yeah.
like when you break that down, it can be any trauma. Like, how are we figuring out how to heal from our trauma? We obviously know movement.
Yeah.
We know meditation. we know being able to sit with ourselves, probably therapy, but how is trauma informed? How is that different also than healing from something else? Like,
Yeah, it's a really good question.
get into it. I feel like I didn't really ask it well, but
We're co-creating. We're
yeah.
co-creating. And luckily we've known each other long enough that like I feel you, right?
Yeah.
So I think there's a couple different pieces to it. So I, over the years, have come to think of healing as a spiral path, and not just like a two-dimensional spiral, but like a three-dimensional spiral. So almost like a spring, like we're just, and you can go in either direction, and like it can expand out, you can expand in or push in, like, which is to say, and I say that because when I first started going to EMDR therapy, at one point I asked my therapist, like, am I at the halfway point yet? Like, I'm not at the beginning anymore. Like, am I at the middle of the race yet? Like, and when will I get to the end of the race, right? And it was, thinking of healing as this flat line, with a beginning, middle, and end certainly was not helpful for me. And that's why I kind of laugh when you're like, you're on the other side. I'm like, oh, when did I get to the other side? Like, when did I cross the finish line? Because, it's an onion in a certain way. Like, I keep peeling back new pieces of myself that want to be healed. And so that's one piece of it, that framing of healing as a spiral path is helpful for me, especially when I get frustrated or impatient, as a lot of people I work with do. And then I would say that, actually, I know it's probably, played out or something at this point, but the body keeps the score, which we can probably put in the show notes. I think is a very helpful like overview of like what is trauma, what are different modalities for helping to heal trauma. And one of the things that I think that book does well is explain how the nervous system functions, because we really can't, I think, understand trauma without understanding like the nervous system at a basic level, like fight or flight mode, rest and digest mode, and what happens to our bodies and our nervous systems, how they're impacted when we experience a traumatic event. And also, like you're saying, like looking in yourself, how do I notice when my body's in fight or flight mode? What does that actually feel like? And what are the
Yes.
tools that I have to shift back into rest and digest if and when I want to? Right. So, because for most people who've experienced trauma or post-traumatic stress, again, their nervous systems are often constantly in that fight or flight mode without us even knowing that. That was certainly how I lived. So there is a certain sort of communal aspect to the work that I do with survivors that is also very deeply healing. And people find these communities in different ways. For example, I watched a documentary about a group of veterans that like had started surfing and like started to heal their post-traumatic stress disorder that way, PTSD, through like just coming together and learning how to surf together. And like I said, a lot of the women who I work with in yoga workshops or yoga retreats have never been with other survivors before. Sexual violence and sexual assault are usually very isolating experiences for a lot of reasons. And so, and particularly for how they are stigmatized, and a lot of people don't talk about them, even though it happens to 1 in 3 women. So there is a certain sort of healing that comes from just being together, with our experiences, even though the experiences are always different and unique. There is a certain sort of togetherness that I think I know, can be very powerful in healing trauma.
How has all of this changed your spiritual belief system, or has it?
It's such a good question. So I remember when I was probably like 7 or 8 years old, and we went to Idaho every Christmas, most Christmases, to visit my grandparents. And I remember, I was like Christmas Eve, um, and driving down the street. It was like it was like sunset, and the sun was setting behind the mountains in Idaho, and there was like snow everywhere. It was really quiet, that like peaceful, snowy feeling. And I remember we drove by a church and there were lights on inside, and I was 8 years old, and I thought, God, it would really be nice to believe in something, like to have that feeling, right? And I didn't have that feeling, that like spiritual connection for a really long time. I discovered it first, actually, when I did, this is embarrassing, it's like so cliche for a white girl, but like when I did a service project in Africa when I was in high school, and there was something about being in like embedded in a really spiritual community that just like woke me up. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, that's a feeling I haven't felt before. Like that was that feeling that as a little kid I had wanted, just like that spiritual connection. I'm like pointing to my heart, right? It feel that's where I feel it the most strongly. And so that happened when that awakening when I was about 17 or 18, and I honestly have just like been interested and curious about that feeling ever since. Like, and that's one of the things I love about you doing this work, Laura, is like your curiosity. Like it's just so bright, and like it
Thank
reminds me
you.
of a kiddo. It reminds me of a kiddo in the best way. Like you're just so excited to learn, and
Yeah.
like you have almost like that humility, right? And that like beginner's mind, so to speak, that they say in Buddhism is like the key to learning. And that's like to me, like on my spiritual path, that's kind of what feels good, is to like always be in learning mode. I will say that like after having processed so much of my trauma over the years, over the past decade, really, um, I have much more space to feel my own spirituality, and like that deep spiritual connection that when I'm lucky comes mostly during my morning practice, but other times too, like when I'm in the woods or when my daughter gives me a certain smile. Yeah.
And so connected with that, something that I'm asking everyone on the podcast, since, I had this near-death experience,
Yeah.
is what do you think happens when we die?
The first thing I want to say is I don't know. I've just been like very interested in um humility recently, because I've like been through some major changes over the past year, and like I'm like, oh, I have no idea what's going on like with life and like what I'm doing. Like I'm trying my best, and like
It's all
I'd
you
like
can
to,
do. Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
like life can change on a dime. So I'm like, I mean, I don't know. And also, like, I think something is going to happen to my soul after I die. And I think my soul was somewhere before I was born, and my soul is going to go somewhere after this body dies. And I do agree with your dad that like the soul probably is reborn in a certain way. But I'm not sure that the soul is always reborn on Earth. Like, I think there are probably a lot of planets to choose from. And if the universe is listening, like, maybe I'd like to try out a different planet next time.
Yep. Well, you got to put it out there, right? Put it out there with intention.
Yeah. What do you think happens?
I think, I honestly, it keeps morphing into something a little bit different, but I think we slip through the veil. I think our body dies and we slip through the veil, and our soul, which is to me now, I keep getting better words to define it, I think, after every episode of this podcast, truly, because I'm learning so much from everyone that comes on. But I think we slip through, and it's my consciousness, which, when I had my near-death experience, it flew out of my body. I believe that was my soul. And I think that part of me slips through the veil into a place called home, into our actual home,
Wow.
where we are completely expanded, like just expansive beings. And then have you ever read Journey of Souls?
No.
I will say I never finished it because I did start listening to it, and it's a lot of the same, but it is a series of people who were regressed and brought to the point in their life when they die, and what happens. And so they are their subconscious is telling the practitioner. But it's like, hundreds of cases just like that. And the cases are all different types of people from all across the world. And they're all similar. They're all similar accounts. Like, these people don't know each other. They're all similar accounts where people are meeting their guide or a guide, or, someone's coming back to meet them, their parent or their sibling, or, someone is meeting them. And sometimes it's in a temple. Sometimes it's in a field. Like, I think it's like whatever I think is the most comfortable for the person to transition is what you will see. But it's like beautiful. I'm like, it's an evolution, we're evolving.
Wow.
I
wonder if you're like less scared of death than other people.
Yes. I think, yeah, I definitely am.
Yeah. Well, what freedom that gives you in life then.
Yes, but I think that we're also taught to fear death. Why? Why do we fear it? Why are we afraid of it? We're taught to fear it. I mean, maybe not everyone is, but we're taught that it's sad.
Right.
And sure, there is an ending, but it also is a new beginning for that person. Like, it's sad for people here. We'll miss that person. But, I don't want to take away from anyone's experience. Like, grief and loss they can be awakenings in themselves, because they can be extremely traumatic. And, but, I feel very grateful that I can not be afraid of it. But it's like, you can read all the books, you can have all the conversations, but until you experience something, you don't actually know. It's like,
I know.
You read all the books before you're a mom. You're like, oh, I got this. I've
Laura,
babysat.
when I was pregnant, I read a book about like how to get your baby to sleep 12 hours a night within 4 weeks. Cut to me like a year later, of course, like still waking up with my child in the night. Like,
Of
to your
course.
point, like you don't know until you know.
You don't know. You don't know. And so it's like, while, this podcast is meant to help people on wherever their journey is, unlock something or hear something that might interest them, or, introduce something that maybe you've never heard about before. You still don't really know.
Yeah. I'm so like, just hearing you like in this moment share that story of like, the veil opening and then you coming back. I'm like, oh, like we're so lucky we got you back here. And like,
Thanks.
B, like, I don't know. I just feel this feeling like the universe is like, no, like your work is not done.
Yeah.
Like there's more. No, there's more to do.
It was meant to be a wake-up call for me, is how I see it. It was meant to wake me up. And so it was no accident. If it didn't happen, I don't know what I would be doing. I'd be probably working some like entertainment job that did not fill my cup. You know?
Sometimes the universe has to shake the shit out of us.
Yeah. Yes. It was definitely, I definitely got shaken up. So, okay, tell me about what you are working on now and how you interact and can help people heal now. What does your practice look like in that way?
Sure. So I have a couple of offerings. If anyone wants to subscribe to my newsletter, that's one thing I'm really passionate about. I have a newsletter that just goes out once a month. Nothing fancy, but I have some, I think, like really deep and beautiful reflections on healing in there. And it's like a nice way for me to stay connected with people and people to um, connect with me. I also share some like just like I went to the Shenandoah Valley a couple weeks ago and I shared some beautiful pictures because, back to your question on spirituality, like nature, Mother Nature, like really helps me drop in, right? Like your
Me
tree,
too.
like teaches me something and tells me something and slows my heart rate. And so my newsletter is one way to kind of stay connected and access my work. I also have a yoga therapy practice where I work one-on-one with clients, again, mostly women, mostly sexual assault survivors, or trauma survivors. But I work one-on-one with folks to, we do a little talking, we do a little meditating, some movement, whatever's helpful for people and kind of what they're working through. So that's like a really kind of intensive way to work together. I also lead a trauma-informed training once a year, so I'm in the midst of my eighth or ninth training. Um, I led it at Kripalu a few years ago, which was a real honor. And it's basically a training for anyone who wants to learn how to be trauma sensitive, wants to learn more about what trauma is, wants to learn how to be mindful of sexual assault survivors. Again, given that 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men has experienced sexual trauma and sexual violence. And ultimately, my vision is that the training, which is fully online, kind of helps us all create like a safer world for our kiddos and our kiddos. And then I also occasionally will lead like a retreat or a longer weekend long workshop, that kind of thing. I'm planning a good one for 2026, so stay tuned. And all that stuff is on my website.
Which we will have in the show notes. And Halli, this world, this earth, I know you want to be on another planet, but this earth right now is so, so lucky to have you here helping us all heal.
Thank you. You're gonna make me cry.
Oh, it's so true. It's so true. And you have done such hard work to get here. And it's, when we can heal ourselves, it just raises the vibration of everyone. That's
it's everything.
Yes, it's everything.
And there's one thing I want to add, because you asked me about, the impact of my work on people, and I thought you would appreciate this. So almost every time I lead like a workshop, like a room filled with survivors, that kind of thing, when we're in the middle of something, either like the rest or the movement or the meditation, I can see, with my mind's eye, like the healing, like you just mentioned, radiating back generations, right? So like the healing kind of like as if it's moving behind me, generation to generation. And then also the healing radiating forward generations, right? Like a ripple. So you're right that like when we heal ourselves, we actually can't even conceptualize like the enormity of the impact.
Oh, just healing generational trauma, going backwards and forwards, all the trauma.
Yes.
It's so good. It's so good, Halli.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for coming on and being so open and sharing.
Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
I love you so much. I'm so
you too.
happy. I can't wait to do Kundalini yoga with you in the summer.
Okay, it's a plan.
Thank you for listening to The Woo Report. For way more woo-woo, please follow and subscribe to The Woo Report podcast on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you love to listen. Never miss an episode of The Woo Report by joining the community at thewooreportpodcast.com. Thank you for liking, sharing, rating, and loving on this little slice of magic. I am so, so grateful you are here. Bye.